Hello everyone, today I'm going to do a video on the VBC Lightning FXM. Now I did a video yesterday and I just wasn't happy with the angle, the overall length of the video, so I'm going to do another one today and hopefully you'll get a better picture of what's going on and also it'll be a lot shorter. Yes, I do have a cold, that's why my voice is rumbling like it is. Now, I'm going to quickly talk about the build. The build went really well, really smoothly. The parts and fitment was perfect. There wasn't any issues. However, I will retract that statement and point out that there was an issue with the upper ball cup and ball here. They addressed this issue in this kit and they said that they improved it and they did not. So I ended up going back to the Yokomo style ball and ball cup setup here, which works wonders and really makes the front end nice and sturdy. Hopefully the next F1 kit that they come out will have probably, I hope, a better setup there. Nothing really to say around this area here, pretty standard affair. We move towards the damper here. This is a new damper set up for the FXM. It comes off of like the touring car platform. It's a smaller damper. It's a true big bore damper unit. Great because it reduces the overall center of gravity. The only con is the actual length of the shock doesn't really accept standard length touring car springs, standard length springs. So if you do decide to use this shock, you're going to have to lengthen out the actual ball cup here in order to accept standard length springs, which you can see here. Or you can simply revert back to your standard FX damper. I don't see any performance improvement between the two, so you can choose whichever one you want. Going to the axle's a definite improvement from the FX. They've allowed the setup here to allow for standard ball bearings. So you can go ahead and use like a Yokomo thrust bearing or a Slapmaster thrust bearing. However, the thrust bearing that they provide in this kit isn't your typical thrust bearing that you would think, as I just mentioned, Slapmaster or Yokomo, which is a little bit of a disappointment because it would have been really nice to actually have a thrust bearing, as in, thrust cage with the two races that you can, build and disassemble. But it's just a standard bearing. So that was a bit of a disappointment. Other than that, everything is working out quite nicely. My setup, if you can see here, I'm gonna have to move the car. You might be able to get a good view here. I'm running 1 and 2 spacers in between the lower mount and the aluminum caster block support. This allows the suspension arms to be flat, and what that will do is that will lower the roll center and it will make the car easier to drive. Front springs, I'm running Ride Super Softs on the front. You'll just have to test and tune and figure out what springs work best for your car. Going hard with the springs does not work. You definitely need to test and tune, figure out what springs, as I mentioned, work for you. And that's pretty much it. Camber, I'm running about -1, -1.5. You'll have to adjust that to work for your track as well. Moving back here to the shock, I'm actually running a drift spring. This is a very soft spring, which is ideal for F1 racing. However, the spring that comes with the shock, it's too hard. It's an actual touring car spring, and a lot of drivers that I've spoke to, they said it's just too hard. You can't really drive the car. It's too twitchy, so on and so forth. So you want to look at getting, say, for example, an X-Ray 2.2 spring, which is nice and soft, and you're able to maintain rear traction and overall stability. Softer the better. VBC springs are too hard, so don't bother with those because they're kind of meant for touring car. Look at some other aftermarket F1 specific springs. The shock oil I'm running, I think, 450 CST. Side springs, right now I'm running CRC 0.50 on the side springs, but you want to adjust and tune to figure out what works best for you. But that would be a good starting point, in my opinion. The damper tubes. Now the damper tubes are quite small, so what you need to do is look at increasing your damper tube CST weight. You want to look at going up to, say, as a starting, I would say 50,000, and then work your way up. I think if you go any lower, it's not going to work. The smaller the tubes, the higher the CST value you want to go with. Okay. Rear pod, I'm running the Axion spur gear, which in my opinion was not a smart idea to provide this spur gear in this kit because I found it was quite fragile after I think 3 or 4 runs. I tapped the boards and the spur gear was gone. If you can, I would probably switch out the spur gear to something that's a little bit more durable. Which is unfortunate because the Axion springs are the Axion spur gears are really nice, high quality spur gears, but I don't think they're very good for this kind of application unless you don't touch or tap the boards whatsoever. But it could have been a fluke that the one tap I had on the board, the spur gear went. But as for the differential build, the differential is absolutely smooth. You'll see in my previous videos about the FXM, I did a differential build and it shows you all the steps. Very smooth differential, very important to have a smooth differential for F1 racing. And the kit settings for the track width, the F1 is very narrow. And so what I ended up doing is I took like a touring car wheel spacers, that you would have your wheel and then your axle, you put them in between like the hub and the actual wheel just to widen the track width. I did that for both sides here. I tried adding axle spacers, but it didn't work because the way that this clamping and threaded portion setup here works is, once, say that you've added axle spacers here and here to widen the track width, when you tighten the nut down, it basically presses down onto the axle and it pushes the axle hub into the spacers, which binds the actual washer, so it doesn't work. So what I ended up doing, like I said, is used touring car spacers and put them on the outer hub here and outer hub here. I think it was like 2.5, maybe 2.5 on both sides. So that widened that out to 190 millimeters. And the front, I added some shims on the inside here in order to widen out the front here. And I think that's maybe around 188 millimeters on the front. You want this to be a little bit narrower than the rear. And that's pretty much it. I did have an issue with this wheel, I think. It might be the wheel or the actual aluminum machining here of the output hub. I found that the wheel was wobbling quite a bit, even when it was mounted. This side was fine, but this side had quite a bit of wobble in it. So I ended up taking a piece of plastic and sliding it over the hub, so that kind of took up any slop or any wobbling, and so that worked out perfectly. Just very quickly, the damper tube setup here. If you are running like the standard height shorty packs, you're going to have issues with the battery touching the actual damper tubes and making contact with the suspension as it's compressing. This only happens when you have the battery 5 millimeters back, but if you move it 5 millimeters forward, that's not an issue. But you can get away with, I think, modifying the damper tubes a little bit to shift them back. But for me, I'm running just a shorty pack, like like a 1/12 scale shorty pack, so it's a 2 cell lipo, but it's encased in a 1 cell lipo case, so it's very low profile. And that's pretty much it. Overall, my impressions with the car, it worked out really well. The key thing with F1 is, finding the right, center damper, side spring, and front spring setup. Now, from what I've seen so far, hard springs don't work. Ideally, you want to go soft. So, soft center spring, soft side spring. Like right now, I'm running a .50 CRC. Look at bringing it down a little bit. Also, the front, you want to look at bringing the spring rate down to, say, maybe, I'm just talking about ride springs. Maybe try ride super soft or soft, or ride yellow, and give that a try, and that should help out. And just go soft and really test and tune and really figure out what works for you. You're gonna have to change the caster, the camber, toe out, and so on. And this car is very easy to adjust, and I think it will be a great competitor on the track. And my overall impression with the car, first time running rubber tires, it was very easy, very manageable around the track, very durable. I had a few good solid hits, flip, rollovers, whatever you want to call it, and the car came out unscathed. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you are interested in the FXM, go check out VBC Racing's website, and you could definitely pick up option parts there to further improve the FXM. Okay, bye-bye.